The Gold Board intensifies efforts to formalize the gold sector with its 2025 audited report showing that its dedicated anti-smuggling task force is significantly curbing illegal trade. Now, this is pushing more artisanal and small-scale mining exports into formal channels and boosting foreign exchange inflows, with the country now recording about $20 billion in gold exports in 2025, up sharply from $10.3 billion in 2024.
Now, in the corporate space, Casa Preco PLC posted strong performance with profits rising by 55% in the first quarter of 2026. This is driven by lower borrowing costs and steady demand as revenue climbs to 853.2 million Ghana cedis from 821.9 million Ghana cedis a year earlier.
Well, on domestic debt markets, the government missed its treasury bills target for the 7th consecutive week as investors continue to demand higher yields. Latest auction results from the Bank of Ghana show a roughly 10% undersubscription, with investors taking up just over 4.48 billion Ghana cedis against a target of 4.89 billion Ghana cedis.
Now to the international market. Samsung Electronics, the world's leading TV manufacturer, has replaced its head of television operations for the first time in more than 2 years, in a move seen as part of effort to respond to growing competition from Chinese brands at home and abroad. According to the official, the new leader is expected to bring a fresh perspective and change what is needed for the TV business, which is facing intensifying market competitions.
Well, still on the international markets, but this time around, let's take a look at the energy sector, because amid the stalled crude oil deliveries and supply disruptions in the Middle East, oil giants ExxonMobil and Chevron have recorded drops in profit in the first quarter of 2026 despite surging oil prices. Now, Exxon's quarterly earnings fell to $4.2 billion from about $7.7 billion the same quarter last year, a decline of about 46%, while Chevron's profits fell to $2.2 billion from about $3.5 billion, down about 37%.
Now, Access Holdings PLC has reported a profit before tax of 1.01 trillion naira for the 2025 financial year, marking the first time the group has crossed the 1 trillion naira mark threshold and signaling a strategic shift from skill-driven expansion to value-focused growth. Well,
before we go, let's take you to the macroeconomic front, as analysts are warning that Ghana's inflation outlook, while currently aligned with policy targets, remains exposed to global shocks, particularly rising fuel prices. Although the 2026 budget is projecting end-year inflation at around 8%, within the Bank of Ghana's targets band, sustained external pressures are threatening to shift that trajectory.
Now, we've seen the figures. We have analyzed the data. 15.63 billion Ghana cedis was recorded over 2025 by the Central Bank of Ghana. What actually went into this? We break this down on Big Analysis. Stay with us here on Beyond the Numbers. We'll be right back. Keep watching.
Hello, my name is Pamela from Customer Service. Please revalidate your account by texting your Ghana card number to 0500,000 247.
Hey, Abili, wabadim.
Madam, give me the numbers behind your ATM card. I'm calling from the head office.
An email was delivered across to our customers this morning.
Confirm if this is your bank account. 100,100,100.
Thanks for sending your bank card details.
Send the OTP now to avoid cancellation.
EcoBank will never call, email, send an SMS asking for your PIN, OTP, bank card, or Ghana card details.
Don't get played. EcoBank, the Pan-African Bank.
Hello, please, I'm calling from Customer Experience Center.
As the sun rises over the city of Accra, its warm glow settles on one of the city's most thoughtfully planned communities, Lakeside Estate. And once again, something exceptional is unfolding. After the successful sale of our 4-bedroom Orca at Lakeside Hills, a new masterpiece is about to make its debut. An exquisite 4-bedroom story Orca home overlooking a breathtaking landscape of the Abri Mountains. This remarkable home now features a total floor area of 330 square meters, set on a generous 7,140 square foot plot.
I'm ready to give it my all, my talent, dedication, heart, everything for this journey. What's all this?
Welcome to the Breakers.
You need more than a rhythm to survive these fees.
Mothers give us everything, love, strength, and life itself. And it's time to give back. Joy FM
Present the Joy Mommy's Day Out.
Join us on Saturday,
May 9th.
for a day bursting with thrills. We'll have your day packed with irresistible activities like paddle boating on calm waters, an adrenaline rush with horseback riding, quad biking, exciting safari tour, friendly competitions such as dance contests, and wrap the prize, a chance to meet the mysterious Ujafokwa crocodile revered as the protector, and to top it all off, a delicious feast of local dishes and drinks, accompanied by the sensational sounds of the Ajinkoro Band. Come, let's crown our mothers with joy and adventure at the Crown Forest. For inquiries, call Lois on 059-1709-309. The Joy FM Crown Forest experience is proudly brought to you by the Crown Forest, where nature meets luxury.
Traveled to Dubai to go find greener pastures. Then I found this one friend of mine who actually helped me. So I was just into this kind of Chinese company thing. Yeah. But it got to a time that the Chinese company work broke down. So I had no choice than to look for another country to go settle so I can find more money to help home. So as they told her, they said stewardship, and they called for a roll call. Like, which kind of stewardship roll call thing? So we all came out, and a commander came. They said we are waiting for a commander. He came, he was a Ghanaian. We were 54 in numbers, whereby we were being dressed to move to the front line. At that time, we were lucky enough that it was snowing. So the snow actually helped us a little. Yeah, you can choose snow with a mix of sand. With the 1st battalion, you have to be fit before you get there. And with that, you are dodging drone, you are dodging landmines, you are dodging long distance missiles, you are dodging bullets, you are dodging grenades.
Hey, so you knew you were going to die then?
What I hate is to remain in a job and be bad-mouthed in the job. Just be diligent and do the work.
You sit on the Kosi said, politicians come and sometimes they tell the lie blatantly. How do you get the truth out of them in a way that does not expose their ignorance?
If you have more shoes than books, you are not thinking, you are walking.
Kosi said, one of Ghana's long-standing biggest political show. Kaba, amazing guy, did the job, delivered. How was it taken over from him?
There were articles written, Kosi saying, Obi over Western region, Obi in how would that person succeed, but
people get opportunities where they cannot execute themselves and have to recommend for other people, but there's a certain fear that is this person going to deliver like me?
Yes.
What requirements do you look for in recommending somebody for a job?
First of all, start by...
If a man walks up to a circle of friends and say, Charlie, and am I depressed? Those are Jimmy, I don't know, Bearman attitude, how do we shape the new generation of men to be men with purpose?
I thank you so much for this question. It brings everything home for me.
Welcome back to Beyond the Numbers. This is the big analysis here where we delve deeper doing all the necessary diagnosis on key economic issues. And this time around, what is on the top index or table is the Bank of Ghana's financials for 2025. There's been several conversation analysis by various stakeholders in the economy, making sure that whether these losses were reasonable, depending on the decisions that were made by the Bank of Ghana. But one thing, what is quite common in all those analysis is that the central bank has been able to get its inflation target above target, and it's been able to get the policy rate assessed. It's been able to get all the key fundamentals in check, but the cost is what many are questioning. And this is why we're bringing you this analysis here on Beyond the Numbers. And we'll be speaking with Mr. Bernard Otabil, the Communication Director of the Bank of Ghana, as well as Dr. Richmond Atuahene, who is joining us on Zoom right about now. And also with me in studio is my colleague Caleb Ziblim, who is going to take us through the numbers for us to appreciate the whole outlook of the central bank. You've written extensively since the report came out. Now, from your first assessment, what did you deduce by going through those numbers?
Yes, Winston. So like you said, the Bank of Ghana released their financials last week, Friday. For the entire year, there's been some speculations before the report came out as to what's going to be inside the report. And then if you really study the central bank's activities for last year, you will realize that they did incur some significant costs. So coming into the release of the financials for the central bank, we knew that we were going to take some heavy costs, and then we're just waiting for the financials to see how the costs were going to be presented. And you can see we did a trend from 2008. That's when the currency was changed a bit. From 2008 to the latest report. And then 2025, the loss was 15 billion Ghana cedis. And that's the second highest loss we've seen since 2008. The highest was obviously during the crisis era in 2022, where the central bank had to take some of the, or absorb some of the shocks that Ghana was going through. And we took some impairment losses and also some of the government debt to prevent it from spilling over into the economy. So in 2022, the central bank did an unprecedented at the time of 60.8 billion Ghana cedis in losses. Then the losses improved to 13.1 in 2023, then to 9.3 in 2024. And then in 2025, that reversal switched, where within the past 3 years, over the past 2 years, the losses were reducing, but then the loss increased in 2025 to now 15.6 billion Ghana cedis. Now, the main issue is that, or the main factor driving the loss in 2025 was because the bank was very aggressive in its open market operations. And to an extent, the partnership the bank had with the Ghana Gold Board, and also because the cedi appreciated by about 41 or 40%, some of the assets that the bank held in dollar terms, when you convert to cedis, it also reduces the balance or the income of the bank. So these are the three main factors that contributed to the loss of the central bank in 2025.
We'll get extensively into this, but I want us to stay on the 60.8 billion loss, which I would like to bring in Mr. Otabil on this conversation. It's good to have you here with us on Beyond the Numbers. And also we appreciate the extent of openness from the central bank's perspective in dealing with issues of this nature. First of all, before 2022, how would you describe the central bank's role in ensuring stability and ensuring prudence and ensuring that their various mandates are adhered to?
Right. Thank you very much. Caleb, Winston, right?
Yes.
The role of the central bank is backed by law. If you go to Section 3 of the Bank of Ghana Act 2002, Act 612, as amended, it states clearly what the central bank must be engaged in, which is what? Maintaining stability in the general level of prices, right? And that is a very narrow mandate that is given to the central bank. Of course, this is also subordinated by, other objectives, such as maintaining financial stability, maintaining payment systems, stability as well, because the payment system is a very important, channel in our monetary policy transmission, of course. So that is something we also got to make sure that it is not impaired. Otherwise, the transmission process all gets, impaired, and then you don't get the desired benefit. So that has been the mandate of the central bank, and that will continue to be the mandate of the central bank. But I like where you started from, looking at before 2022. It brings in a very, very important issue that we really have to look at. Now, the debt exchange program that actually happened, the bank had to take a very heavy hit, both on our marketable and non-marketable securities. About 48 billion was actually taken off the books of the central bank. Now, if you look at this as interest-bearing security, what it then means is that we would be receiving some income from these securities, which have now been, has suffered some form of haircut in that process, to put it in the language we all understand. What does that translate into? That means that following the domestic debt exchange program, the bank actually loses, on the average, about 13 billion in revenue that we should have been receiving if the debt exchange program had not taken place. Because the ones that we had also had to be booked at the new rate, at the reissued rate. So the revenue situation, started from there in terms of the loss of revenue, that we could have had, that we don't have. So that is where you should actually be looking at. But our mandate has always been to maintain stability in the general level of prices. And why is that important in the first place? Why would the central bank be given such a mandate? Because controlling inflation is key, right? It is key because it is a precondition for maintaining economic development, or maintaining sustainable economic growth. In the long term, this now feeds into our living standards and improves what we do. What else do you have to know about it? If you have a low and stable inflation, and within a mandate floating exchange rate regime that we have in this country, ultimately its impact on the exchange rate, which then also impacts on everything else that we do. How does that happen? If the exchange rate is stable, not only stable, if it has some level of appreciation against the US dollar, for example, and as an import-dependent, largely, economy, what would that do to the real sector of the economy? You and I, the bread and butter issues, it affects your fuel cost because it feeds back into the price of fuel at the pumps, right? If always your currency is depreciating, it affects everything else that you do, including your electricity payment, because all of that also have to be powered by the imported, fuel that has to. Right? It has so much ramifications. Transport cost goes up. Farm gate prices might remain the same, but the carton of food from those farms to the various centers, market centers, would also go up. Mm-hmm. So food inflation would be impacted. When food inflation goes up, the real incomes of people will reduce. Because whereas if your wage or your income is not inflation linked, indexed to the rate of inflation, what then happens is that at every movement in inflation, you suffer the consequences.
So what went in deciding that this year, 2025, we are going to aggressively ensure inflation falls to single digits? Because we've seen over the years the challenge in even getting to single digit to the tune of we seeing inflation far above 54% some time back. And that decision and the cost element taken into fact, you mentioned the loss position, which I want to understand. Before even we get to the inflation question, I want to understand there's this narrative that as a central bank, you are not supposed to be in a position to even say you are making losses as against making revenue, and which I would like to get your address on that.
Yes, good one there. Let me take the first one, because your question on what make you make that decision that we are going to go in aggressively in 2025 to control inflation. The decision to control inflation is not made in a boardroom, right? Nobody sits in a boardroom and decides that this is what we are going to do on inflation. There is a dedicated committee that will look at where the monetary policy rate, which is a tool that we use to influence short-term interest rates, should be in order to influence inflation, right? So that plays on the inflation dynamics. That monetary policy committee, a 7-member committee, is made up of very credible people, right? The head of research is there, the head of treasury is there, the 3 governors are there, and 2 external members with knowledge in finance and economics are also there. When they sit in that room, and it's important that I make it clear, they don't just sit down and say inflation is here, and therefore let's put the monetary policy rate here. They will start by looking at global development, global growth development, global inflation development, and anything within the global context, because we don't live in a vacuum. We are affected by all global conditions. Then they will come back to the domestic economy. In the domestic economy, how are these geopolitical issues, trade tensions, and inflation within the global economy going to influence or impact on the domestic economy? Mm-hmm. Then they would also target or look at so many other variables, including development in the banking sector, right? Including the business confidence surveys that are done, and all other factors that would go before the decision is made. So that is actually the framework for an inflation targeting central bank, and that is what we actually do, right? So I hope I've explained that, so that you get it clear that it's not a decision made in a boardroom somewhere that people say we are going to go aggressively on that. Now, what happened in 2025, I believe is something that a story that must be well told. Now, in 2025, as you can see at the financial show, there was a very aggressive, posture in terms of the control of inflation. Look at 2023. At the end of December 2023, inflation, right, was at 23.2%. At the end of December 2024, inflation was at 23.8%. Between 2023 and 2024, inflation was sticky around 23%.
That we know. What did you do to get to that point? Yeah.
Good. Well, what we did is the cost you see. What you did is the cost you see.
So the end result justifies the means.
The end result justifies the means, not because of what you are saying, but because of what the numbers.
I have not said anything. I'm just asking.
Yes, the end result justifies the means. Absolutely. Because inflation now, at the last check, is 3.2%. At the end of December, it was 5.4%, having moved from 23.8% to 5.4%. That is such, a 77% drop in inflation. And that is quite, huge. And that is something that wouldn't come cheap. When you go into the market to mop up excess liquidity from the market, there must be some compensatory payments to those who are taking the money from. So those commercial banks that buy the bulk bills, which are short-term instruments that we issue to them, must be compensated. And that's the interest we pay, which is, on around the monetary policy rate. So if you have a monetary policy rate, which is quite high, now it's about 14%. It's not about, now it's 14%. But if you're looking at where we have come from, and you are mopping up at that very high interest rate, definitely to impact on your balance sheet. But the point is that what is the trade-off? A central bank cannot sit aloof and allow inflation to go haywire. That is not a central bank worth its salt, right? That was central banking of my youth, and that is central banking today. that central banks have inflation targeting framework as what they do. I mean, the adoption of inflation monetary rate targeting, whatever, but they always would have to control inflation.
Okay, so I'll come back to you shortly. We have with us Dr. Atuahene, who is also joining us on Zoom right now. I want to go straight to him. Dr. Atuahene, it's good to have you with us. First opinion, what is your assessment of the central bank's loss that has been reported in the 2025 financials?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. And good afternoon to Bernard. I think it's a necessary evil. I'll call it necessary evil. Inflation is an evil, and if you want to fight it, you need to do everything humanly possible. And this is exactly what happened. But before I continue with that, the real issue, which I stated earlier in 2022 and the 2023, and I want to be quoted everywhere. Immediately the DDEP happened, I said the central banks were going to be in trouble. The reason being is that if you're losing 13 billion averagely on your income, no matter what you do, you're not going to break even. But you see, in this country, let me make it clear and categorical. We tend to forget too early. We tend to forget too early. When the DDEP came, I stood in, wrote a lot of papers saying that central bank and the banks were not good. The banks suffered a little bit, but the central bank suffered hugely. And because of that, the conducting the OMO, repo, even other mechanisms used was not going to be easy. So for me, the losses as I sit here, I have talked about it earlier. So it is not a new thing to me, because to go and operate the aggressive, to bring inflation to the realms where it is, you need to use the OMO. And Bank of Ghana used, I think, 14 days, 28, 56, 90. They were aggressively trying to target inflation because inflation is an animal in the system.
Would you say that particular approach worked based on your assessment?
For me, if your mandate is to create price stability, you have to do that. Because, you see, we have lived inflation from 54%. We dropped to 23.2 and then went up to 20. It means it was becoming a cancer, which needed to be fought aggressively. And that was exactly what they did. So for me, there is no free lunch. When I hear this, people talking about those of us who have written earlier, it is a normal thing.
Would there have been a better option, especially the kind of tool the central bank used in dealing with this particular inflation targeting approach?
The tools are that we use the money OMO, which is a clear tool. We use as cash reserves, and then we use what we call repo, repurchasing. If at that time they have already used the cash reserves and it was not functioning very well. So they look at it and look at the other options and say, look, at least for OMO, we can go in as the policy rate with a policy rate and we'll be able to bring it down. And let us say it. I'll say it without fear or favor. I think we tend to forget too early. And the whole nation, 2022, I said it on Joy platform, that is not going to be for Bank of Ghana the next years ahead. But people were just singing the chorus. Dr. Atuahene, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I've done a research and I've studied other jurisdictions. And I knew what was going to happen. So when I saw the loss and the aggressive nature of controlling inflation, I thought it was the step right in direction. And again, when Mr. Otabil was talking, there was something he also left out. Once upon a time, we go to the Eurobond and borrowed and hedge it as currency reserve. Let me tell you, we used to go to Eurobond and borrow money at a cost and come and put it in Bank of Ghana as a reserve. Now we have switched the goal. We speak the goalpost. Let us look at the gold. Although it's very expensive or we made a little losses, if you see the benefit of the gold that has been accumulated and compare to the time we were borrowing to show it the currency, you would have no business talking about even the 9 billion that is lost, because we have made enormous savings. I mean, look, we have reserves. I mean, once upon a time, we didn't have these reserves, and we haven't had it for, I think, all my own years in the whole world, living in this country. to have a reserve of 14.5 billion. 5 months import. It has never happened in the history. You can go back because I've worked with Bank of Ghana since 2008, I think 2006 when we were doing the foreign exchange. So for me, we should look at the positives and talk about the positives and dwell very little on the negatives so that we can re-strategize way forward to help us to let the central bank function.
Dr. Chana, in talking about the positive, there's a need to be quite aware about the negative as well. What are the risks involved, especially now that we've seen the outlook of how the central bank used gold in ensuring that the reserve outlook looks quite okay? But I want to understand from you, in instance where, let's just assume there was no gold, domestic gold program, would this approach be quite credible for the central bank, considering its the risks involved?
The gold project was not started yesterday. It was started in 2021 by Dr. Addison. June, go and read. After going around, we realized that cocoa could not take us anywhere. So they decided, let us look at the gold being smuggled all over the place. So PMMC started doing something. But when the new government came, he started to shape things. And I'm saying that if we don't move forward and begin to think what we have done and complain about the negatives, we will not go forward. Now, let me make it clear here. Countries are being told to copy Ghana. The IMF is telling other jurisdictions to see how best they can go into the gold and hedge. So I agree, the losses have come. We made losses on the sales. But to me, compared to the reserves accumulated and the inflation down, and let me repeat, borrowing once upon a time, we borrowed to shore the reserves. Now we are not borrowing. We are strategizing using gold to hedge our reserves. Other countries, you can check all other countries, even the UKs, the Americans, they all have gold. They buy gold. Russia, they all buy gold because they think it's a commodity that is able to stand very well against inflation.
All right.
So for me, I don't have any problem. But all that I'm trying to say, Bank of Ghana must be aggressive to talk about the past. The past, you see, people tend to forget the past.
Dr. You mentioned the 2022. I'll come back to you shortly, but I want our viewers to appreciate some few dynamics from the financials briefly. If I'm to deduce from both responses from Dr. Atuahene and also Mr. Otabil, it's simply telling me that the 2025 financials, especially in the OMO operation, seems to like an investment in stability that we can see from the currency and also from the inflation aspect. But we'll deduce shortly on that. But I want to come back to Caleb. You know, Caleb, you are looking at the policy solvency position of the central bank. Take us through that one.
Yeah, so the central bank, the main measure of the central bank is whether it is policy solvent.
Yeah.
And this means the core income of the bank versus its monetary tool without the open market operation. If the core income can meet the open market operations, then the bank is policy solvent. In 2025, we saw that the bank was policy solvent by about 5.5 billion Ghana cedis. But it is important to point out that about 9.5 billion of the income came from the sale of the gold. Now, again, the argument has been that without the sale of this gold, the gold reserves about 51% of the gold in our reserves, the bank would not have been policy solvent. Because if you take that out, the core income of the bank would have been somewhere about 12 billion Ghana cedis versus the OMO cost of about 16.7 billion. So there would have been a deficit. So understanding these dynamics and then also the time that the gold was sold about late since 2025 means that if the bank did not sell the gold, it would have been policy insolvent. So the gold, even though the primary objective was to rebalance the foreign exchange portfolio, because about 40% of the bank's foreign exchange or foreign reserves were in gold. If the price of gold falls at any moment, the bank is going to be very exposed and the value of the reserves is also going to come down and investors might get worried. So the bank had to rebalance the portfolio. But the side benefits of that was that the bank also had some extra income to support its books to show that they were policy solvent. Right. But then the next question is, moving forward, if the bank maintains this sort of aggressive open market operations, the bank's policy solvency might be at risk again, which is what I want to get from Mr. Otabil. Moving forward, because of the way the bank's income versus the monetary policy tools were in 2025, if the bank is going to maintain this aggressive intervention within the open market operations, will the bank be able to move forward? with the same line of trajectory?
Right, yes. Let me just address one, fundamental issue that has kept coming up. I've seen that you've reworked the whole accounting position by way of bringing back the profit made on the sale of gold back into your statement and taking it out over the overall position and then coming up with what you describe policy insolvency. Now, one fundamental thing that needs to be established is that there was nothing illegal towards the sale of the gold. One. The other part also you got to look at is that in central bank reserve management, there are specific things that are being considered. You look at the safety, you look at the liquidity and the returns that comes with it. So in looking at these, you have to be very careful to make sure that there is nothing like concentration risk. Now, this is the point where your gold, right, the value of your gold holdings as part of your reserve position was upwards about 40%. What does it say in terms of, portfolio management of a central bank? You are looking at bringing it down to 20% or below. So that concentration risk was there. So that is what the decision that was made in order to make sure that the portfolio is rebalanced in that particular context. And that's exactly what the central bank did. You're talking about the sale of gold. One thing that we fail to also recognize that there are always two legs when it comes to accounting. We sold the gold. What did we receive? We received FX in return. That FX is still part of our reserve, and it is earning interest in that regard. So that FX is still earning interest. So the gold has just been reclassified into another form of asset because we may hold in foreign currency, we may hold in other instruments, and we may hold in commodity like gold, like what actually happened. Now, the last part of your question is whether we are going to go in and pump money. Look, you can't solve economic problems with neat equations because economies are not deterministic. You can't. However, given the point where we are now, if it should continue the way it is in terms of the strong macro fundamentals that we have, all the indicators point to the fact that going forward, for instance, NPR is 14%. So even if you are mopping in the market, you are not going to mop at the same rate as you used to do in the past, right? The dynamics are clear. Inflation now is stable and under control. You don't need to go, you need to make sure that inflation does not move about our medium-term target, which is 8 plus or minus.
All right, Mr. Otabil, we are joined by my colleague Akufo-Addo, who is currently with us right now. I'm sure we've been listening to this conversation wherever you are on our social media handles. Dr. Chan is also live on Zoom. Kofi, it's good to have you with us as well. And I'm sure you've listened and you're obsessed, and we've both been going through the numbers. It's interesting dynamics there.
Yeah, I think this is one of the conversations where you always have to find a balance, right? Yeah. You can't go on the either side of the extreme, whether the right side or the left side. You need to be in the middle to analyze the situation well. And sometimes, maybe because of how we've communicated certain things in the past, it makes breaking down reasons why we are here difficult, right? Because as a central bank, I don't think that if we had done things right in terms of how we communicate some of the reports about central banks, we should even be here justifying why this is so. Because I simply do not see anything wrong with paying a cost for stabilization. But maybe because of how it was communicated and how people criticize it in 2022, 2023, and 2024, it has made it difficult to possibly defend why it should be so in 2025. Let's try and understand. If you want to fight inflation, and yesterday I was on Saturday, those of you who listen to Newsfile, a lot was said on why we are at where we are. If you look at the economic crisis of 2022, that brought us to 2023, and the difficulties we had in 2024. Nobody should tell you that it is going to take more than half a decade or sometimes even a decade to recover from what we suffered in 2022. At the point where we needed somebody to take the bullets for us to get the, the 3 billion bailout package from the IMF.
Yeah.
We did haircuts, right? People fought against it. At the point, we had to make a decision that we're not even going to put haircuts on pension funds. It was the central bank that came in to say that, we know we are in a difficult situation, took about 40 billion in haircuts write-off, right? That in itself is a big loss sitting on the books of the central bank. And it's also an economic cost that the central bank paid in 2025, did a similar one in 2022, 2023, and 2024. So at the moment where the losses have reached 15.6 billion, the conversation is actually still the same.
It's interesting. Let me get a brief assessment from Dr. Otabil, who is currently with us on Zoom. Doc, you've heard the assessment. One thing that is quite common is the gold narrative that is the key lining through. Would you now say, as the gold board has indicated that this year they are going to be operating on their own books instead of the books of the central bank, will their operation somehow be implicated, considering the fact that they said they've reported some huge amount of profits? One will say you can only declare profit when you're working against a previous year. So what is your basis for that assessment? However, we are still looking at the fact that going forward, will it position the central bank in terms of collaboration, ensuring that our reserves are looked in terms of the central bank's position in running the Ghana Accelerated National Reserve Accumulation Program?
Gold board just have to buy the gold, and then somebody had to get it right. Either we get it to our assets in Bank of Ghana.
Doc, make it brief because we don't have much time, Doc.
Yeah. I believe that strategy is good and we must pursue it, because we cannot go on the international market and borrow and come and hedge the currency. Let us use the best that we have and minimize the cost. And it is, to me, it is the best way forward to support the reserves and the stability of the country, the city.
All right. Will you also, Dr. Mr. Otabil, forgive me, would you say that the Ghana Accelerated National Reserve Accumulated Program is kind of a rebranding of the domestic gold program?
Well, this is a policy.
Or is there a difference in a way?
There's a difference. I mean, the GANRAP has come to make the sector better, right? It is backed by law, and the GANRAP has its own specific target in terms of accumulating 50 months of import cover over from now to 2028, right? That's what the GANRAP really does. It's really going to improve on the existing domestic gold purchase program and actually giving it a structure, and it is backed by law, and to ensure that our reserve, as the country's reserve accumulation program progresses, it is actually managed in a more under a statutory arrangement. So that's what the GANRAP really is. And it's come to improve what we're already doing in terms of our gold resources and how we use it to build a reserve for the country.
In terms of the value chain cost elements, which the Bank of Ghana has taken on, we've seen that on the books of the financials of the Bank of Ghana. How is that going to be dealt with in the subsequent accounting year?
I think even before the account was released, the governor was very straight on how the burden sharing aspect would have to be handled. All the narrative will tell you how important the gold accumulation program has helped this country. Reserve level that we have 5.7 months of import cover is huge. We've never experienced this before in the past. Now, in order to do this, certain costs have to be incurred. You have assaying fees, you have off-takers discounts, you have other commissions that you have to pay within the whole value chain. And the Bank of Ghana was bearing the brunt of most of all these fees. That is not going to be the case going forward. And that is something that the governor has always emphasized, that the whole system has had to go through some form of recalibration and to make sure that we don't have to, the bank alone taking up this. This is an economic cost. If you build reserves, you build reserve for the nation. And that economic cost should not be something that the bank bears alone. So then the burden sharing, as he keeps emphasizing, is the point where everybody must be on board. In this case, the government also coming in and taking part of this.
Now, talking about burden sharing, we've heard that phrase before the DDEP, that we are sharing burden. But it got to a point where individuals even had to even carry their own burden, as against the fact that its implication is what the consequences what we are facing now. Now, you're talking about burden sharing. We know about the instances of monetary and fiscal looking quite uneasy sometime going back. You've signed an MOU with government in January somewhere. What is the position of the MOU? Is the finance ministry in line with your objective as a central bank in instances where the IMF will be out of the picture come August?
Well, I mean, you stated a very important situation, not just for Bank of Ghana, but it is something that most countries face. You would have a situation whereby the fiscal and the monetary are not in sync, right? So then you have something like fiscal dominance. And when such a thing happens, for example, your central bank goes in there to be doing the mopping, and then the fiscal is always on the overdrive. And therefore, it's like having a running tap on and mopping. That is not the case. If you look at our narrative in terms of what has happened in the economy happened in 2025 till now, you see that fiscal monetary coordination, policy coordination, is what has given us the benefit that we are enjoying now. And with fiscal and monetary, must agree. If there's no policy coordination between the two, then there's likely going to be a problem. The assurance is there, and the governor, the finance minister, at every opportunity that they've had to speak to the post-IMF effect, they've given all the assurances that what they put in place will be sustainable, or will give that sustenance that we need going post-IMF. Look at the primary balance. Look at I don't need to go technical again, as you know, look at what is really happening. Fiscal, monetary, fantastic relationship. And that coordination is also what is contributing to the benefit that we are enjoying today.
I've had the privilege of sitting through some government years, and I still feel déjà vu, especially about this statement. And let's hope that particular reflection, we home beyond the numbers will keep assessing. Let me get, Caleb has a question for you.
Mr. Otabil, so I think moving forward, the main concern is about confidence within the sector. Now, with a negative equity of about 93 billion, can the central bank absorb any shock that is to come in the near future, especially now that, as for instance, we are leaving the IMF program? So I think maybe twofold here. If the central bank's books are strong enough to absorb shocks moving forward, and again, back to the recapitalization question, have there been any steps taken to ensure that the central government is supporting the central bank with his books and aligning the books in order?
Right. In a minute, please. Sorry.
Right. The relationship, as I said, between the fiscal and the monetary is quite obvious. It's solid. The whole agreement is for recapitalization from 2026 to 2032. Even before that, the Ministry of Finance has already taken steps, to show that, look, we can even do some front loading even before the time that has been given to us. So that has been established. Now, the policy solvency issue, as you rightly defined, should give you that comfort. And then also one thing that has not been looked at by so many of the countries that we have, nobody is looking at the cash flow. Look at the cash flow statement in the financials and it will tell you. Because as I always keep saying, cash is fact, profit is an opinion. Because the profit may contain some accounting valuations and so on and so forth. The cash is what tells you what is available to spend and what you cannot really do. If you look at the cash flow statement, it's solid enough to tell you that we are liquid enough going forward to carry on with our operations. And there is nothing, and let me put it clearly, that what we're discussing is an audited account. It's an audited account, and the audit account has not been qualified. It has a clean bill of health, which should tell you that the external people that looked at the account had no reason to believe that a significant part of our operations will be curtailed in the foreseeable future. That is the going concern concept in accounting. So we are completely out of the woods. We are clear in terms of managing our operations, and given all that I've stated earlier, trust me, going forward, we should be coming back with better results.
Before you follow up on the accounting principle.
Briefly.
There was a change in the auditors. Right. For the first time in about, I think, 6 years or so, you changed auditors? Was there any reason why you had to move from a different auditor to one?
It's international best practice that you don't have to have an auditor for more than 5 years and so on and so forth. It's there, and the literature is there to support it. You know, when it happens to Enron, Tyco, Peregrine, and all these global, situations, you know what happened to Arthur Andersen. Right? Arthur Andersen, which was part of the Big Five, lost its license because it was actually earned more from management fees than from the audit fees.
Oh, great.
So then it turns out that...
Great. Let me get a final opinion from Dr. Atuahene as well before we go. Dr. Atuahene, in less than 1 minute, what is your final say? You've heard the various opinions and also the assessment before we go.
Well, before I get my final opinion, auditors are supposed to be their regulatory requirement. You're not supposed to be there more than 3 years. So taking them off is not a new thing in banking or in finance. The time they've served 6 years, it was even more than necessary. They've been there. So changing them is not a hulu baloo. It's a real issue. But going forward, now that we have aggressive monetary policy in place, the cost is very high. At least inflation is even below the Bank of Ghana own target. 8 plus and -2. And I'm sure they are not going to continue with the aggressiveness so that they will make it a bit loosened so that private sector could also compete for cash business to expand their business. But apart from that, for me, it's kudos. There is no free lunch. And I want to say it. Those who are making noise, go and read the literature in 2022, as I said. It is not a new thing to us. We saw it coming. The losses will possibly continue, but not in that magnitude. Great. Because they may not go the aggressive way of OMO and repurchase. So for me, it is the step in the right direction. It's kudos to governor and the team. Work hard and let the country enjoy the best of its time, please.
Thank you, Dr. Atuahene.
My final comments would be, we've paid a lot to actually be at where we are. So I think now the conversation should be about sustainability. How do we sustain this momentum that we've been able to get from this huge cost that we had to put in place? Currently, the bank has gone through a lot, taking the bullet in 2022, 2023, and now also paying another huge cost for the stabilization we are seeing in 2025. So this is a precious, gains that we've had, which comes at a high cost. So we need to be able to guard it well and make sure that we are talking more of sustainability, possibly going into the future, and not putting ourselves in a situation where we did in 2020, 2023, where we had to do restructuring, and the bank itself at a point and even now needs, recapitalization.
Caleb,
that's the final point.
Before we go, your final words?
I think the entire sector is really about confidence. I think the posture from the BOG now is that they have enough shock absorbers to ensure that the country and the economy is not, whittled away by any shock in the near future.
Great. So you've had various assessments here on Beyond the Numbers with regards to the 2025 financials with the Bank of Ghana. The whole conversation has been, if you could conclude or deduce, is that the 2025 financials is an investment into stability. So all the various stability you're seeing, especially from the Forex, from the inflation, all of them are the key reasons why these losses have been attributed, including the outflow, the cash reserves, the various gold policy institutions, and various decisions taken by the central bank. So this is just an assessment of the initial aspect. Expect more conversation here on Joy News going forward, and we'll make sure to bring you up-to-date update on key issues developing on the field of business. My name is Winston Taki, and I did this with Isaac Ofieje and Caleb Ziblim. We're privileged to be joined by Mr. Bernard Otabil, the Communication Director of the Bank of Ghana, as well as Dr. Richmond Atuahene Banking Consultant. We appreciate your time here on Beyond the Numbers. Have a good business day. Up next is sports.
Ghana Police Service is facing potential legal action from artist Ibrahim Muhammad.
He and his team were attacked by members of the Black Maria.
It's all over Ghana that a diplomat has been beaten to pulp.
Ibrahim Muhammad is a peaceful citizen. If you do this to him, what will happen to some of us?
That DSP Jalil is a dangerous human being.
He's a controversial person within the police service, and every policeman can attest to that.
One of the police officers saw me, and I could see a sense of caution and fear on his face. He went to them and he said, "Do you know who that is?" I said, "That's Ibrahim, the guy that the president gave the diplomatic status." And then he said, "Oh, and so what?" These people, they really don't care about any of these things. They are just power drunk.
The job that you have for me, do all these things for me, and the world comes back to you. Okay?
The first thing was a punch in my face, and one of my teeth got broken immediately.
I was really assaulted by the police today. You can see how they broke my tooth.
There's data we collected from 2016 till now. There's been 9 police brutalities. Guess what? Not even one person has been convicted. Do you believe you're gonna get justice?
My old adult